Today we're going to take a look at a couple of Macintosh SE 30s that I picked up at a garage sale. There's one here that's a bit yellow, but not too bad. There's another one that's a lot nicer looking, but when I look inside, I see some crustiness that's very concerning. The company I got them from was a Mac service company, so I think there's a good chance that when we get in here we find out these machines may have been parted or used for parts. Now, at the same time as I got these two computers, I also picked up two Apple LaserWriter 1s out of a pile of, I swear there was at least probably 40 or 50 of these. And then I also picked up a pair of personal LaserWriters. So I am going to start with the scary looking one, which is this one right here. It's got some Velcro on it, so I'm going to guess that they had some kind of a polarizer or something on there. I'm not sure. There is no programmer switch on either of them, and the back panel is missing. So first thing I got to do is get inside, and for that you need what I've heard called a Mac cracker, which is just a T15 Torx with a long shank. That's for getting up in here. So to start off with, I just want to look inside, see if it's salvageable, and if it is, I will put it back together, power it up, and test to see what it's doing. Normally on something like this, I would probably go ahead and recap first. However, I've never worked on these before. I'm a Commodore guy, Commodores and PCs, so I've never done service on a Mac. If I put it together after a recap and whatever else we find, I want to know if what it's doing is something that I did or if it's something that's new. That's loose. Oh, that came right off. I expected more fight. But what I'm seeing here leads me to believe that this is probably going to end up being a parts machine. So, thinking that's not a good sign. That's looking pretty hairy to me. I suppose it's safe enough for me to take this off. This hasn't been powered on in probably well over a decade, I'm going to guess. Let's get inside and see what the main board looks like. Again, being really cautious of the yoke on this CRT, because who knows, I may need it. All right, so there's a hard drive, 1988 quantum date on the chip. There we go. Now I got some leverage. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. We're going to take it out this way. Holy Toledo, what a mess. I think that battery might be shot. Clearly this board will never run again. I'm going to do some experimentation on it. I just want to see how far it can be brought back. Obviously, it's not ever going to run again, but as far as removing the corrosion, do some experiments on that. Looks like it might be getting up onto the floppy board too. The power supply, though, doesn't look too bad, so hopefully we can rescue that. And then the analog board. So let's just hope that the other one has a good logic board, and it looks like it may have a good analog board and power supply in this one if I need it to repair that one. So definitely a lot of corrosion on the frame that the floppy's mounted in. Seems like Apple must have had a goal to use as many different screws as possible when building these things, because they're all different. Now, there's definitely a little bit of corrosion on this board, but it certainly doesn't look too bad. A couple of these resistors are really crusty. Don't ever do this without discharging the CRT if it's been plugged in, even if it's been a week or two. All right, so here's the analog board. Doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look like people have worked on it before. No sign of leakage on the caps. Overall, I mean, visually it looks great. So upon further inspection, I noticed that this connector has a dark spot on it. It's turning brown, and that the connector on the board that it plugs into is also. And looking over here at the solder joint, it's hard to say, but it almost looks like a cold solder joint where the post wasn't hot enough for the solder to adhere to it. This power supply is looking really nice. Normally when I look in a power supply, I expect to see a lot of dark spots on the board because they're just inherently, power supplies tend to get hot. I'm going to leave the CRT in the case and set this aside. I pulled the RAM and ROM off the board before tackling the disintegrating lithium battery. So this battery has completely disintegrated. The components under here are just loose little orange blobs. So that's what it looks like after a cursory toothbrushing. So I'm gonna do a little experiment here. Here I'm worried the water is gonna cause an issue with the WD-40 getting to it. And then I remember WD stands for water displacement. So that shouldn't be an issue. Okay, well I am gonna set this aside and let it do its thing, and we'll see where it's at when I'm done shooting this video. I should mention too, I did not get any keyboards, discs, or anything. I have a friend that owns a Mac business here in town. Hi, Robin. So I got a deal from him on a classic keyboard and mouse. So hopefully one of the hard drive works. If it doesn't, I will have to look at options like a SCSI to SD card or something like that. We'll set this aside and come back to it later. All right, so next we'll take a look at the other one. It's certainly quite a bit yellower than the first one. And you can see, one thing I'm noticing right away is that don't need a mat cracker because there's no screws in the top. So clearly someone's been in this before, but coming out of a repair shop, I don't think that's any great surprise. I'll pull out these two screws and see what it looks like inside. I'm going to take a real close look, see if we got any signs of leaking caps or other issues. I can see it definitely has a battery in it. The bottom of the board looks pretty good to me, first glance. So I am going to take a risk, and I'm going to go ahead and plug this in and turn it on. Normally I wouldn't do that on a machine I was familiar with, but with this machine, since I'm not familiar with these, I want to know what it's doing now so that when I recap it, if there's an issue, if I know if I caused it or if it's something that was already there. All right, well, let's see if it goes pop. It has a mouse pointer, that's a good sign, right? And we have a floppy disk with a flashing question mark. I'm guessing that means the hard drive is not being recognized, but it turns on. Of course, one of the disadvantages of doing that is I have now charged the CRT. So I don't want to be messing around this and getting zapped. I think what I'll do is go ahead and wait and get a proper discharge tool. I've seen people doing it with screwdrivers, but when I was in school, we used a probe with a resistor on it that would bleed it off instead of make a big loud spark and potentially damage things. I suppose I could call this video Dead and Alive, the Tale of Two Macs. All right, so this must have been a musician's Mac because it came with rock and roll. And I have to do this indecent tweaking of the frame. Oh, well, these aren't rocks. These are some kind of a nut. I'm gonna guess some kind of a mouse or rodent was nesting in this at some point. Taking a look at the main board, what I'm gonna do here is one thing that should always be done first before anything else, and that is exorcising the evil within. go. And comparing this to the former lithium battery, boy, what a world of difference. Date is 3 of 90. This lithium battery has zero sign of leakage. So that is what saved this Mac, I'm sure. There's definitely some corrosion and greenness around some of the caps, but the damage seems minimal. So it looks like this Mac may have a bright future. I'm really excited to be able to work on and learn a system that I've not used before. I've already ordered a boot floppy and a set of caps, and I'll order a SCSI to SD card as soon as they are back in stock. The restoration of this machine will have to wait for these items to come in, but in the meantime, let's take a quick look at how the battery damaged board is doing. It's really interesting how within a few minutes the WD-40 started to have this white curd-like substance in it. I suspect it's trapped water since I rinsed the board beforehand. After a 24-hour soak, I removed the board from the oil and rinsed it in the sink and scrubbed it with some soapy water. What I found was that many of the lighter deposits were removed, but there still remained a very hard layer that seemed mineralized in the worst affected areas. I found even a fiberglass pen would not remove this layer and had to carefully break it loose using a small jeweler's screwdriver. Then the fiberglass pen did a nice job of cleaning things up. If this was a 2-layer through-hole board, I would be fairly confident it could be restored, but as a 3-layer board with surface mount components, I don't see any hope for it. Many of the components have fallen off, and others, like this math coprocessor, have pins that are completely eaten through. In the end, this poor Mac has pushed its final bite, but it may yet bring life to another machine as an organ donor. If you enjoyed this video, then here's some other repair videos that you might like. I'll be back with a full restoration video of the Happy Mac as soon as the parts have arrived.